Are you stuck in the same old routine at work? Do you find yourself hitting a creative wall, unable to see beyond your current perspective? It's time to break free and unlock the power of fresh perspectives. David Gouthro back with another episode of Discover Fresh Perspectives. I keep saying I have to find a better way to introduce it, but I'm always back again, so we're just going to go with that. So today I have as my guest Michèle Soregaroli. Welcome, Michèle.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here, David, as always.
Now, the irony is that I'd been on your podcast fairly recently, and it actually came out at the time that we're doing this. So it's there's no coincidences in life. So Michèle, we're going to have a wide-ranging conversation, but before we get into that, sometimes it's helpful to have context. So maybe you could let our listeners know, what is it that you do? What's the nature of your work? Which doesn't necessarily have to be what we talk about, but who was Michèle Soregaroli?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm a differentiation coach, professional coach, and I inspire entrepreneurs who are at a place where they feel like they're just not satisfied with just good. They want more, they want to forge their own path, and they want to experience success on their own terms.
So I should probably be one of your clients. But first, you said that you use the term differentiation, and I haven't heard people use that particular phrase. So maybe you could say just a little bit about what that means and how that's different, perhaps, from what other people do.
Yeah, it's interesting. Differentiation is a funny word. Well, first, it started probably with math. I learned differentiation in mathematics in university, second year, which is actually where I met my husband, ironically. But differentiation. And that was when I discovered that differentiation in math was not my thing, and I should probably not pursue a minor in math at university. So I just stuck with my French degree at the time. But so that's where differentiation, I think, originally started. But in the world of business, differentiation is more known, more specifically associated with marketing. So how do you differentiate from competitors? How do you stand out? How do you do your thing? So from my perspective, taking it another step further, that marketing around differentiation to stand out can be really good. For product-based businesses, but it looks a lot different when you're selling yourself. And that's why I get really, really passionate about the subject of differentiating when you're actually selling yourself as a service, as opposed to a product like a running shoe or a car, for example, or a box of cereal. So differentiation as a service is, how do you actually create a value proposition so that or how do you create value, or how do you help someone, a customer, client, typically in services, how do you help a client know that they've made the right decision and that you are, without a hesitation, the best choice for them to deliver the outcome that they want?
So that's helpful. And the reason I say that, sometimes, with some of my clients, we talk about differentiation, but it's got to be differentiation. It's got to be a difference that actually has value to the customer. Mm-hmm. So, I can be different from someone else because I wear different clothing or have more or less hair, things like that. But that doesn't necessarily translate into more value for the customer or for the client. So,
Yeah.
So how do you ensure that I know we're diving right into this, perhaps too quickly. You can always pretend it's a bad line and hang up. But how do you ensure that the differentiation is actually a difference that matters? When does that question come into play?
Differentiation is something that matters. A good question. The biggest thing I think is, again, I compare and contrast quite often with product-based, because when you're differentiating a product, you're really just trying to garner attention. You're trying to get that product to stand out so that when you're in the supermarket, you want to buy the Shreddies instead of the Cheerios, for example. So it's just putting your focus or your attention on that. And in services, that doesn't work, because services, people want something special. So when you're looking at the value proposition, and that's why differentiation for me in the work that I do is all based on, how is it that you come together in your relationship to create optimal value between you? So that value is not just about what you do for them. It's actually also in the experience itself, so that your client can then experience something positive, something easy, something where they feel elevated through the experience, not just that the problem has been solved, which is more transactional in nature, but there's a power in the relationship that creates more value because of more inherent trust, more inherent belief that it's going to be easy. So there's less friction, less tension. You know, those clients when they phone and sometimes you think, oh boy, this one's going to be a challenging conversation. Those ones have lower value to both parties, right? Because there's friction in the relationship or there's tension in the relationship. When you differentiate well, your client knows that there's not going to be any tension and it's going to be great.
So I've been reading a lot lately and listening a lot about the power of stories. I mean, I've known about that for quite a while, but these days it's like if there isn't a story,
That's what
there's
they say,
nothing.
yeah.
So, could you give an example, maybe a genericized one, that kind of describes how you work with one of your clients that demonstrate what you just talked about, where, what were they before? What was the process? What impact did the differentiation have? And, if there is a way to measure that, to measure the value of your services. So what was the process and what was the outcome?
Thanks for asking, David. So first step, when we start out, clients are typically at a place where they've got a level of experience. They feel very competent. They're capable. They do good work and they know it. And they actually know that they're valuable. And they struggle because they're not typically being rewarded or acknowledged or appreciated for the value that they think they deliver. And so sometimes they're feeling like, I don't understand why I don't have more referrals. I don't understand why my clients aren't more loyal. I just lost one last week that I didn't think I was going to lose. And I don't understand why these relationships that I think are stronger are not as strong as I think they are. So that's usually where we're starting from, that place of, I know there's more, but I have no idea what this looks like. And we can call it differentiation. It's not always the search. That's not what they're looking for. So the process then is, okay.
So let me just back up just a bit. So what I'm getting out of this, wouldn't be working with someone necessarily in a startup phase, but someone who's a mature organization, so knows what they're doing and things like that, and is looking how to grow or magnify or go beyond that.
Yeah, yes, they already know how to get clients. They already know how to convert a lead into a client. So I'm not looking to help. I'm not skilled actually at helping those who don't know how to generate a lead or convert. So that's not the zone that I'm good at. What I am good at is helping create that really powerful match or the connection. So what do we do first? Once we understand what the client is doing, step number one is absolutely establish the value. So we look to establish what is it they think that is valuable about their work. What do they do to create the value they think they're creating? And so we start talking about it and sort of maybe poking holes and creating some empathy around the situation and helping them see that maybe that's not as different as they think it is. Because I work with so many, I'm like, oh, I've heard that before. Or, that's not as unique as you think it is. Because a lot of these business owners, they work in a bubble. So they have no idea what others do other than at a more conversational level with peers, but they don't really get into the details of it.
Kind of legends in their own mind, potentially.
Well, they think, yeah, you know what? I'm unique because we do this. Or the one I hear a lot is, I know that my clients value what I do because we have a great relationship. And so I might ask questions about that. What gives you that sense? How do you know that you have a great relationship? So that's what I mean. We establish what the true value is as opposed to the perceived value. And we establish it from the perspective of, what do you think you're generating and what do you want people to experience? So we're building it from a two-way as opposed to just one way. So we start there. And then typically clients will work with me anywhere from 3 to 10 plus years. I have clients that have been with me a long time. Yeah. So we tend to work because it's a fun journey and we just keep growing. So then after we figured out what the value is, then we're like, okay, let's go find the money. Like, let's go turn this into results. So then we start talking about packaging of services and the positioning and also the fee structure and how they're creating an understanding of the value so that there's a true agreement so that the client knows the value that they're buying. So we establish the value. And then we find that money. And then once we do that, then once money starts to happen, because we tend to see a pretty quick uptick in terms of revenue, that can be, 2, 3, even 5 times revenue, typically within somewhere between 18 months to 3 years. It can be even sooner.
Wow.
But we do see a significant uptick in value very quickly around the revenue. And then once we start to understand the value and the money equation, or like, okay, let's establish now we're starting to move into reputation and brand components. So we talk about, for me, I'm not a branding expert by any stretch, and I'm not a marketing expert, but I do understand the pillars of integrity. So what I'm looking for here is integrity, consistency, reputation that makes you highly referable, creating safety in terms of what that client can speak to in how they've experienced things. So we establish those pillars of integrity, I like to call them. And then now we've sort of landed on a certain level. We're like, okay, this is really solid. We've got a really solid foundation. But now, as you're elevating your value proposition and becoming even more valuable in the market, now we actually have to work on your identity. So because your identity has to grow with you, because you can only grow to the extent that you grow, right? So we have to keep your identity, how you see yourself, in other words. We have to start working on that. How do you see yourself in this experience with your clients? How do you see yourself in this equation?
So could you just differentiate between your identity and your personal brand? Because some people may be hearing that, and I think you're saying something a little bit different.
I am saying something different, yeah. So personal brand is how others experience you, and that could be reputation. It could be how just simply what others think of you, right? So that would be personal brand. When I'm talking about identity, I'm actually talking about how you see yourself. So how do you position yourself, or how do you see yourself in the equation, not just in delivering the experience of value to your clients, but also how do you see yourself as a business owner? How do you see yourself in this experience? So where in an example, if you've got a consultant, for example, or someone in, say, insurance, or financial services, for example, commercial real estate, doesn't matter. But if they see themselves as, if they see themselves, or their self-image is, I'm this type of advisor, I make this much money, I deliver things this way, my clients experience this. And if they don't actually elevate that, so if they see themselves as a good player, but not a great player. For example, I've always made $250,000. I see that a lot. I've always made $250,000, $500,000. I'm always in that neighborhood. I'm always been there for as long as I can remember. But what they need to see themselves as now is $1 million player. But that's an identity shift.
So this is kind of like an extreme, like on the same maybe conceptual scale as the imposter syndrome, where the imposter syndrome is way down here. But it's not so much an imposter, but I limit my potential by the way I see myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And your identity is, we have beliefs about ourselves that actually get in the way of who we can become, or even who we want to be, right? We have beliefs about ourselves. So the identity work happens throughout our whole journey together with my clients. Because the pillars of integrity and identity and vision and purpose, they're all kind of intertwined. I like to call it a web or an ecosystem as opposed to a path. But I mean, we start that, but we really work more on that as you start to experience, because as you start to experience better results from your work, what happens is if you don't start to see yourself as a person who is generating those results because of your capabilities and your strengths and your commitments to that work, then you'll see it, you'll typically get in the way. We hear about this all the time, self-sabotage. So the most classic example of that is when you've got lottery winners who, win millions and millions and millions of dollars. And, what's the statistics? It's something like within 3 years or 5 years, they're back to where they were, because they didn't start behaving as a millionaire. They still behaved with the same thinking and the same behaviors as they had before the win. So they didn't change how they thought about life, themselves, and the way they lived. And so that's what I mean when I talk about identity. You've got to sort of grow into that.
And is it your sense that clients or potential clients would kind of recognize that without being able to put their finger on it, just kind of get a sense that this person doesn't really feel like they deserve to be in the same room or something like that?
That sometimes happens. Yeah. Yeah. They don't see themselves as that type of person, or they don't, like, um, gosh, I've got so many examples of this, but so a simple one would be, I worked with a client many years ago who was quite strong and you might say opinionated, very, very convicted in their thinking. And they felt that if they brought that thinking forward in their very strong kind of way, that would be detrimental to their business, that they would lose clients, that thinking was just too strong, that advocacy, if you will. But here's where it got really interesting. Probably through the better part of that person's life, they were told that their opinions were too strong, and they were told not to be so opinionated, and it possibly created conflict. So they had a story about who they were. And all we did was help that individual see not only the value in the opinions, so what were the opinions trying to create, right? So understanding what they were trying to generate through that, but also it turned out that they were a passionate advocate for a certain cause, if you will. And advocacy was where all that really strong intention was coming up for this person. And once they understood that it was about advocacy and creating these very clear outcomes, then their comfort with their opinions and their ability to share them in a more valuable way changed.
Interesting.
So their identity or their self-image about being opinionated shifted. And with that shift, it created behavior changes. And those behavior changes, of course, resulted in consequentially more business.
And this is one of the things you help people work through. Like, that seems to me to be incredibly valuable for anyone.
Yeah, that's what we do. And so as you think about, and then, the last step, if you will, once the identity, as we're working through identity and whatnot, the other thing that's a really important piece in this equation, which a lot of people either neglect or undervalue, or, just think it's something they don't want to do, is around setting boundaries. So remember we talked about the integrity pillars. Well, that requires that there are certain lines that we don't cross, or certain lines where our ability to deliver value gets diminished because there's compromises or concessions or shortcuts or what have you that we take in an effort to create more value, but we actually shortcut ourselves in our ability to deliver value because we can deliver value in a certain way. And what we need to find is people who can experience that value in a way that they can extract the most. Right?
And maybe this is a semantic thing, but to me, I'm hearing the difference between, for example, revenue and value. That I could be doing things to bring more revenue in, but might not necessarily be adding value to me or to my client.
That's right. And that's what actually limits us. If you're chasing revenue, then you're in relationships that are more transactional by nature. So you're likely going to have concessions of some kind, whether it's you making those concessions or your client is making those concessions. But somebody is making concessions for that relationship to work, which immediately diminishes the opportunity for higher value, right? So, and when the value is reduced, then the relationship isn't as powerful for either party. And it's certainly not as likely to be as loyal. And it's definitely not going to turn into referrals and advocacy.
Right. So there's, I think, a tendency that some people have to put some of my guests into a box. What box is he or she in? So, I'm wondering if, people would say, and you get to create your own box here, Michèle. So someone would say, well, Michèle is in the business coach box. Michèle is in the marketing box. Michèle is in the professional friend for life box. I mean, what container would allow people to see the realm that you operate in if they need it? And there may not be one, but I figured I'd at least ask.
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, I'm a coach.
Okay.
So first and foremost, I'm a coach. I coach entrepreneurs, and I coach around services because if you want,
sorry, I didn't quite hear the second word that you said.
I coach entrepreneurs in services.
In services, okay,
yeah,
that's what
in
I missed.
services.
Okay.
Yeah, because remember, I don't have any experience with product. I don't know how to. That's not even interesting to me, to be honest. But I'm very,
we
very
just lost
interested.
half the audience.
Yeah,
right
exactly.
there, but that's okay.
But I'm very, very, very interested in. I'm very interested in helping people define how they can create the most possible value. You know, that's what we all want to do, right? We all want to make a difference. And gosh, I hear that every client I think that I've ever worked with. What do you want? I just want to make a difference. I want to make sure that my clients get great value. But it's always, I want to make a difference. I'm like, okay, that's great. And if we don't nuance or give any focus to what kind of difference is most fulfilling for you, then you might be making differences left, right, and center and actually not feeling energized because it's not touching you in a meaningful way. So this is why, this is why differentiation from my perspective is a coaching exercise. It's not a personal branding exercise.
Right.
That comes later. But it's understanding who you are and how you create incredible value and what are the circumstances under which you need to design your business so that you can create the magnificent and magnitude of value that you actually have potential for.
So definitely growing from the inside out.
Oh, yes.
Right? It's kind of like physician, heal thyself, understand what's going on for you before you can truly do the best good you can for yourself and for your clients and customers.
Yeah. So if you go ahead. Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious, Michelle, what are some of the barriers that you've seen people throw up to get in their way of doing this, where you help coach them through it? Like what are some of the things that self-defeating, could be phrases, behaviors, whatever, that you say, okay, you start having this conversation, you say, we got to work on that first. And are there any themes that pop up out of that?
Oh, the big ones are, I can't do that because I'll lose clients, which we discussed earlier. I mean, that was only one example of how that might show up, but I get that all the time. I can't do that, I'll lose clients. The other one is, but I want to serve everybody. So I don't want to lose any prospects. I don't want to lose any potential leads. So they're going for the masses. That's a big, big barrier to overcome. Go ahead. You have questions?
Well, those both sound like intellectual barriers. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there's those, are there other
emotionals?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, definitely. Things like, but nobody knows that about me. I'm like, ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Because the fact that nobody knows that about you, and this is where I get really excited about this, because there is the good and the bad of that. And the thing that you're hiding is probably also your greatest opportunity if we can see how to convert that. So an example, like I just shared the example earlier of opinions, being very opinionated. A lot of people will try to hold that back or temper themselves. And if they can understand by not tempering and expressing in a positive way. So if people don't know that about you, first, you are always operating from a place of defense, trying to contain something, right? And so it's putting you at a disadvantage right away. So that is a big one. Another emotional one would be fear. So when you are, humans are wired to belong in part of a community. So the more arguably differentiated we are, the fear would be that we would be isolated from our friends, from our family, perhaps from our coworkers, right? That they might judge us because we are no longer part of the community, but we are different. And historically, if you've been different and haven't towed the line, so to speak, that can be really dangerous. in terms of community belonging, and in terms of, like, long time ago, if you were tossed out of town, your safety, your physical safety and personal survival was at risk. So we are very much wired to conform. And so that's a big one, right?
So
The fear.
there's so many things that are going through my mind about this. What is a community value, and what keeps a community strong, and sometimes I imagine it's because they are like me. But I can also see other times when a community values you because you bring something that they don't have.
Right.
Right? Like I
Yeah.
remember many, many years ago, I used to think, if there is a spaceship leaving Earth, which now they're talking about going to Mars, of course, but if there's a spaceship leaving Earth, what could I do that's valuable enough that I get an invitation onto that ship that's leaving,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably not by being the same as everybody else,
Right.
right? But I can see that being something that really holds folks back.
It can. Yeah.
Mm.
And I think that in all the years I've been doing this for 21 years, almost 22 years. um, in all the years that I've been doing this as a coach, and I was also in services for well over 15 years prior to that, actually. So I've been in services for a long time. And what we always see is, when you can understand the things that you're thinking that you wish were better, that you wish were different, you would do that, but you're whatever your reason for not, right?
Yeah.
Once you address that and understand how to create value from it, and that's the key. It's if you can understand that it's valuable and it creates good outcomes for others, then you're much more courageous. But if you see it as something that is serving you because you want to self-express and you want to be different, or you just want to be yourself, that's all about you, the individual, and you haven't yet converted that into the experience of the community or your clients or what have you. So you're not seeing any value in it. And the minute you convert it into value and see, oh, actually, there are good things that can come from this. And if you start getting connected with that, then your courage rises, and certainly your creativity increases, and the whole bit. Everything changes once you
So,
convert to value.
like, I can certainly see how having someone like yourself would be very helpful. I've heard it said that, don't ask a fish about the quality of the water they're in, right? They don't have a perspective. And that to help people realize things like that would be incredibly powerful. Not they're not capable of doing it on their own, but there just isn't the environment, the catalyst for doing
Right.
that. So and we'll certainly, I'm going to provide all contact information in the program notes, Michelle. But thinking about people that are listening right now, if and I hate to put you on the spot, but I do. I love putting you on the spot because you respond so
Like,
well.
wait a minute.
Let me just drill down here. So, if there was a couple of questions that listeners could start asking themselves to reflect on, whether they were in the services business or not, but they were kind of thinking, maybe I should start thinking about growing and being more of who I am and things like that, are the two or three key questions to start them thinking down that path.
Yeah, absolutely. I said at first, start with establishing value. So what I would say is, and this is a place I start with my clients as well, um, what do you do that you can't help yourself from doing?
Okay. Just
Not because you
say
have,
that. Repeat that. That's a good one, just so it sinks in.
what do you do because you can't help yourself from doing
Mm,
it? So here's the caveat to that. It's not because you're afraid you're going to lose your job. It's not because you think you're going to lose clients. It's not because you think you might get in trouble if you don't. It's because you literally can't help yourself. So this is
mm.
a very simple example, but for me, I always tell people, if I'm 1 minute late, you should probably start calling hospitals.
Oh,
It's like, there's something really wrong, because I'm not on time because I think it's a respectful thing, or because of any other reason other than I have a small cardiac arrest if I'm late. So I have to. It's just part of who I am. I am always on time to the very best of my ability, and that's, you can set a clock. So that's an example. Now, the second question is yes, I'm always on time. That's all about me. So what's the value in that for someone else?
hmm.
Right? And so then you can start asking yourself, why is that important? Why is it so important for me to be on time? What am I doing what am I trying to create by that? What's valuable about that, right? So you can start thinking about that. So that's the first question. What do you do that you can't help yourself from doing? The second part of it, second question you can explore is, what do you believe that you don't want to tell anybody?
Hmm.
So your secret philosophies, if you will, the things that you don't want to say because you think they're controversial, you might get canceled, or what have you. And so we go there as well. And the reason that's valuable is because once you understand and can own what you think or what you believe, then you can actually convert it into a positive frame. So it might be, and very often it's from a negative frame. So you might not want to share something because it's so controversial, so negative, or very perhaps polarizing or what have you. But there's something about that belief that has success on the other side, that has a better life on the other side. And once you identify what the belief is, you can actually reframe it to show what the value is that comes from that belief.
So could we go back to the first question for just a moment, Michèle? What can't you help yourself from doing? Is there an implication there that it's something positive or neutral, or could it be negative? Like, I just can't help myself from kicking dogs when I see them on the street. I don't imagine it's that sort of thing, but it's presumably there's something that you feel you can't help yourself from doing. At some level, you think that's a good thing. Is that fair, or?
It could be. Usually what I'm doing is saying, when you're thinking about serving your clients, because we're talking about that perspective. So if you're thinking about serving your clients, what are the things that you can't go to bed without completing, or that you want to make sure you deliver on?
That's
Right?
very helpful. Okay.
So the type of, whatever it is. So yeah. And yes, if you can't help yourself from kicking dogs, there's probably something in your belief pattern that is worthy of exploration,
Okay.
right? But
So,
so notice the two questions are what I would comment on here for listeners if you really want to explore this further. One question is focused on your behavior, and the other question is focused on your belief.
interesting.
So there's a reason for that, because most people have a bias to one or the other. You're either a person who's always in action, which means it's going to be very easy for you to identify what you do because you can't help yourself, but you're going to have a tougher time with your beliefs. And that's where your deeper growth happens. For both those people who tend to be more philosophical in nature, then getting them into action thinking is going to be a growth edge for them, right? So we want to tag both ends of that.
Okay, that's great. Those are two really, really good questions that anyone listening can start to think about. Wow.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any generic pearls of wisdom that can have anything to do with what we've been talking about, or nothing, but you just kind of go, I wish everyone knew this or thought this or believed this. I haven't put this much pressure on anyone else, by the way. So it's just because you're smiling and answer my question.
Oh, I'm
Figure,
having
okay,
fun.
let's go for it. So something
Thank
big,
you.
the world would be a better place. How about this? Complete this phrase. The world would be a better place if people would just
Trust themselves.
trust themselves.
Trust your intuition. There's a beautiful quote, and it really does guide me. I think about it so often. It's by Gandhi. And it says, it's 4 lines. It says, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win.
I
And
love it.
so if you think about it, right? If you're doing something differently and you're not really going too aggressive with it,
Mhm.
they will ignore you because you're not really making any kind of significant impact. If you start to get a little more successful, we see this all the time. People ridicule or laugh at companies that are doing something different, say it'll never work. And so they laugh at you and ridicule you and go, oh my gosh, it's never going to work. And then you start to get more successful, and then they start to get threatened, right? So now they're nervous and afraid, and they're thinking, oh my gosh, this might actually work. And then they start to fight you, and this is where this sense of belonging starts to get threatened, right? Because as you are becoming more of yourself, you're going to experience people who've been in your life for a long time, whether they're clients or friends or network, what have you, but they're going to experiencing you differently, and they're going to start to reject that. Not everybody, but some people will. And so they are going to start, you're going to have those who ignore it, then those who people laugh at you and go, what the heck is this guy? Like, he's gone off his rocker, right? Or what's she up to over there? And then it's like, no. And then they're going to start to fight you, meaning trying to keep you inside your box. What are you doing? Don't do that. You're going to burn up your business, or you're going to do something stupid, right? And so you get all that. But what happens is when you stick through it, and by the way, I have lived this, that's for another day. Lived this several times. But when you stick to it, what happens is, remember those integrity pillars I talked about and your self-identity. What happens on the other side is you succeed, and then people let you be. They leave you alone because you're doing your own thing, and you're doing something that hasn't really affected them anymore because you've gone off on this other tangent. And yes, you may not have a great relationship with those people anymore, but you don't have a broken one necessarily because they just kind of settle down. And you establish brand new relationships with people who are so excited about what you're doing that they're not going to laugh at you or ignore you or ridicule you or fight with you, right? They're just going to leave you alone. So this Gandhi's quote is far more insightful, and it has so much more wisdom in it than most people give it credit for. And the win, of course, is just you get to be you in this case.
Wow, what a great objective for all of us to have, to be ourselves. Michèle, thank you so much. As I mentioned before we started this conversation, one of my measures of success is if I reflect on what's been said, what it means to me. So in addition to having a wonderful conversation, it's a great content for our listeners. There's lots that I want to think about when this call is over. So I've been here today with Michèle Soregaroli. Michèle, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for your questions and for the opportunity, David. I really appreciate your thoughtfulness through this conversation.
Totally my pleasure. And this has been, and it will continue to be, David Gouthro, Discover Fresh Perspectives. Next week, all I can guarantee is there'll be another guest with some other fresh perspectives. Thanks for listening. Subscribe now, because on Fresh Perspectives, every episode is an opportunity to explore new horizons and redefine what's achievable.